Welcome, welcome. I thought we'd have a little game um, with numbers because I would imagine that most of you will actually see this video on the 7th. And we've just had 4th of July. And I was contemplating, I wonder how many channels have made videos on Independence Day and such like. And can't help notice how the UK has just had a general election on the 4th of July. I'm not going to go into the history or perceived history, any of the stories about it. I'm going to focus on just purely the numerology and the etymology and give you a perspective on it. But to give you another perspective on Independence Day, independence or interdependence, it's a live stream that Lana A LaBonte has just made in the last 2 days. Well worth hearing. I feel you'll get a lot out of that. So anyway, what can we see in 4th of July? We just look at that to start with. We'll just look at the numbers. So you've got a 4 and a 7. So what happens if you take 4 away from 7? You're left with 3. What happens if you add 4 and 7 together? You're going to get 11. So you could say a 311 encoded. 11 is a theme I can think readily of the 11th of May in the year 1966. The road accident involving Paul McCartney, and a shout out to Supernatural Beatles channel if you want to look into that, if that's your thing. And it's very well researched and reveals a lot more than just about the Fab Four. Interesting, the 4 reference comes up in that. And of course, depending on what calendar you use and what you perceive to be the start of the year, you may take 1st of March or go with the ecclesiastical year that starts on 25th of March. And of course, that's going to affect the numbers. So July wouldn't be the 7th month, it will be the 5th month. So if we add the 4 and the 5 together, you're going to get a 9, which is completion. But what else can the 4 and the 7 show you? Well, certainly if you add them together, you're going to get an 11, which is a door, which is almost a numerological representation of this realm has a perception of duality about it. So you've got the 2 1s. If you think about it, what is a 4? I've said many times that it's so closely linked to the 11. So if you take one of the 2 1s that make up an 11 and you put a 90-degree angle on it, and then you place it back so it overlays the other 1, you end up with a symbol which is a 4. The 7 could be a reference to the chakra system, the 7 chakras in the body, the energy centers. And of course, you've got 7-11 and 9-11 and 11-11 with the armistice in the First World War. Obviously, timing comes into this because it was in the 11th hour of the 11th day of the 11th month. So probably if you looked into anything with dates, if you can identify the exact time of an occurrence of something, then that will probably reveal even more. So let's turn also to the etymology, independence. This is something I've spoken about probably about this time of year, maybe 2 years ago now. Just look at the word. It's got in and it's got dependence. Now, how do you hear that? Are you in dependence? Because if you look at the external world, the way that it's increasingly made more and more difficult. So if you wanted to grow your own food, for example, and you live in a town, you would probably have to rent a plot on an allotment. So the system has given you a variety, a selection, shall we say, of food, but what, how good is the quality of that food that you're obtaining that way? It's made you interdependent, or in dependence of a system that is going to supply things, because your time will be taken up on earning money to pay for these things. It's a sort of vicious cycle in a way. So you've got independence. Now, it's all down to perception and how you hear the word. Are you in dependence? Are you depending on something else? Is it that there is such a thing that has put itself in a position that sort of tries to justify itself that you need it rather than it, sorry, when the truth of it is for its very survival, because it's not living, it's an entity at the end of the day, it's an organisation, it's a corporation, it's just a concept that's held together, be it a political party or whatever. But you can't actually go up and shake the hand of the government, for example. But to be independent, as Lana says, it's interdependence, because if you look at it this way, you've still got in and you've got ter, which represents earth. And there's also dense. So when you're when you independ dense, it's like almost like a tax on your being, making dents into you. And obviously, in terms of food, it's the consumption, what you're taking in. It's also what you're taking in through the mind, ultimately, as well. Something Lana talks about, how she's not advocating and saying you shouldn't do this or shouldn't do that, or shouldn't eat this or shouldn't eat that, but because we're all different and we have different levels of tolerance and things inside ourselves as to what we can cope with. There's no one size fits all with any of these things anyway. And also, let's have a look at the ending of that. If we allow for the vowel shift, because the independence is the independence, from a perception of this control system. And if you were to sort of zoom out from Earth and have this sort of aerial perspective, then surely humans moving about, dashing off here and there, would look very similar to if you watch ants on the ground. And it's also another clue in all the words: occupants, participants, and so on. Your occupation is what occupies most of your time. But notice it's got oc, which refers to ocular, which is seeing. But how many people see that, for example? So you've got the whole numbers thing that's giving you clues. You've got the etymology, which is giving you further clues on the external. But what about when we internalize all of this? How do you feel inside yourself? Do you feel that you are independent of something else? Or do you feel independent of many things that are external of you? I'm not going to give you answers. I'm just giving you things that you may want to sort of reflect upon and look at how things are. It's interesting as well. I'm pretty sure most of the time in the UK, elections, certainly council and local elections, seem to take place in May, and I can't remember now if there is set dates for a general election. But as Forrest Gump says, life is like a box of chocolates. And that is very true. You're given a selection to choose from, but is it really a choice or an illusion of choice? If we go with a box of chocolates, it's like, oh, I quite like orange, but I don't particularly want the cream, and I don't want it encased in the chocolate either. The whole aspect of the dairy part alone may be something worth looking into. So you have this illusion of choice, but what if you don't like any of the choices? Because you have, hopefully, the awareness and inner standing to see that I'm presented with a selection, but that's not the only choices I have. You've only got to look at the wording with elections. You go to a polling station. To vote is to vote. You're giving energy because you've taken time out of your life either to travel somewhere to put your cross in a box, or you've maybe done it online. Excuse me. It's effectively a green light. When you realise that this selection is just an illusion, you're just saying, carry on. You can dress it up in a different shade of a different political party, but where is it leading? Certainly in the case of this new British Premier. I jokingly said about a month ago with his track record he would make an ideal candidate, and sure enough, he has. And it is basically like a long-running soap opera, and you're going to get different characters cast into the spotlight for a certain amount of time and then replaced by another one, all to give the illusion of change, of choice. But what really changes? Certainly there are changes, but are they changes that are actually benefiting you? Or are they changes that seem more like a noose that's getting tighter and tighter around the neck? It's all perception at the end of the day, and it all comes down to how you feel about something. I just happened to notice I got the little sign, which I, see if we can get it in the camera there. Barnfried University, Dr. Juan Forfar, but notice very carefully the colours and the spelling. I've been looking at monetization of the channel. It's the carrot on the stick, as it were, because it's like you've got to have 3,000 video hours in so many days to qualify, and then it's also I'd have to create an awful lot more of short videos to sort of meet that criteria. Then it suggests about having membership, but I was thinking I may well go down that membership route and then talk more specific about certain topics, more linked to what I offer with the DAPPER befriending, the helping you if you are really struggling in this reality with depression, anxiety, panic attacks, paranoia. The paranoia could be just be down to you've looked at Facebook and you've seen what would be classed as a conspiracy theory, and then I've done it myself. You you import that information into your vessel, you carry that cargo, and you then go around saying, look, they're out to get us, they're trying to kill us and all this. It's actually spreading a very doom message in that way. But then there comes a point of, I'm just being played, I'm being used as an agent in a very sort of coercive way. It's a new angle, as it were, in the same way think of it like a sheep grazing in a field. Now, some of these sheep have started to wander off, so you need to bring them back into the fold. So, in terms of religion, you may set up something like the spiritualist church. These are the ones that are sort of turning more to spiritual and starting to move out of the, the groupthink for the masses, as it were. So there needs to be something put in place to bring them back into the fold, as it were. So you'll find a lot of this even on YouTube. There is talk of some channels are completely AI generated. I can't say I've actually seen any video channels where I could definitely say, yeah, but anything is possible in this reality. But whatever you look at, it always comes down to discernment. It always comes down to how do you feel about it. Where is that feeling coming from? Is it coming from the conscious thinking mind, for example, or is it a feeling that is generated from the heart? It's a very careful process of weighing things up, of being in this world, walking in this world, but also the awareness that you are not totally in this world. It's something I'm going to talk a bit more on, or more about, in the next video. I'm going to encompass it under the title of hyperspace and what that is, or give you my perception of what I feel it is, would probably be the more correct term. And in that, I feel there is a huge key of where you can step through, and there's more than one way of achieving this. I'm gonna hold that over to the next video. So yeah, do you feel independent, or do you feel independence? Do you feel you're independence, you're depending upon something external of you? Or are you truly independent? But no man is an island. It's natural to wish to find your tribe, as it were, find your own species to be amongst. So whilst it's going down this path of being an individual, it's also recognizing when there is common ground between us, where we can pool resources, as it were. We can bounce ideas amongst each other, which sparks things that just pop into the mind. It sparks creativity. You're tuning, as Lana puts it, you're tuning out to be able to reattune inside oneself, and that is going to change your perspective. That will change the way you feel about this reality. By seeing as it is, or as it is presented, but also looking at the alternative of what it also might be presenting, or what it is alluding to, and then finding that little silver thread that runs between the two, that walking that very fine line between yin and yang that is hidden by the what would be the yang, the dark side, the unknown. So the shadow covers the line, as it were, but it is clearly defined when you can see the contrasts and just see it like in that yin yang symbol. It's like, well, it's two halves of a whole. It's giving me two perspectives. I can see the black dot on the white. Equally, I can see the white dot on the black. But what about that huge grey area? It's a very thin line, but at the same time, it's a huge unknown grey area. That's the stepping in through that number 11 doorway. The 4 is also the door. It's basically how you got here in the first place, by stepping through the door of tree number 4, which is the tree of death, which brings you into this reality, you could say. But life is like a box of chocolates after all. So consider, are you being given a selection? Or are you just being presented with an illusion of a choice? Because a lot of these things will come with attachment of a story, a thing called history, but do we really know it to be true, any of it? It's all a story if it's before you even came into this existence, really. You step into a bigger story, but then you can write your own story within that story anyway. Right, I think we'll end that there. And as always, unconditional love to you all.